So just a short time ago, a grand jury in New Jersey indicted a former Rutgers student on 2 counts of invasion of privacy and 2 counts of attempted invasion of privacy. These charges stem from the suicide of Rutgers student Tyler Clementi. Clementi, you'll remember, killed himself after his roommate secretly recorded him having sex with a man. If convicted, that former roommate faces a maximum penalty of 5 years in jail. And this leads us to our next segment. There's a disturbing new study showing suicide attempts by teens, gay or straight, are more frequent in conservative areas where schools don't have programs supporting gay rights. The study of nearly 32,000 high school students focused on Oregon and found teens there were more likely to attempt suicide in less socially tolerant counties. I'm joined now by Mark Hatzenbuehler, a psychologist and researcher at Columbia University. He authored this study. So Mark, explain to us, how do you explain these findings? Is it strictly something that needs to be looked through a lens of liberal and conservative? It seems kind of daft to think it's just all politics.
Right. And I think, unfortunately, that this study, the way in which some people have tried to explain this study is through that lens. And I think, unfortunately, that sort of misses the point of what I think this study is about. We did include in our measure of the social environment the proportion of Democrats living in the county. And that's because previous studies have shown that political affiliation is associated with attitudes towards gays and lesbians. But I think sort of focusing on that really deflects attention from what I think is really the main point of the study. And that's really, how do we create supportive environments for our youth? And so our measure of the social environment actually focused mostly on school climates because, of course, that's where students are spending a lot of their time. Right. And so we looked at things like whether or not schools have gay-straight alliances, do they have anti-discrimination policies that protect gay youth, and do they have anti-bullying policies? And what we're showing is that youth who live in these kinds of schools that implement protective policies have lower rates of suicide attempts compared to those that live in less supportive school districts.
And surprisingly, your study also says that suicide attempts have gone up for teens who aren't bullied, aren't depressed. So does that surprise you?
Well, what we did is we actually controlled for experiences of depression and bullying. Previous studies have shown that those kinds of individual level risk factors matter, but we were sort of pulling back a little bit in this study and trying to understand, not on an individual level what puts people at risk for suicide, but is there something about the social context in which youth live that really places them at risk? And I think that's really sort of the take-home message from this study, and it really provides, I think, a roadmap for how we can begin to reduce suicide attempts among youth through altering and changing the social environment in which they live.
And from doing this, the tipping point that really, I guess, changed from county to county and how you were able to correlate these, tremendous loss of life, teen suicide, it's a terrible epidemic. But it was basically boils down to social tolerance?
Well, I think that, again, we looked at several different dimensions of the social context. We looked at the proportion, for instance, of same-sex couples who live in the counties, and which suggests sort of providing couples who live in counties that are more tolerant, and that was one of the dimensions that we looked at in this study for that reason. But again, I think our real focus was on school climate, and I think it really suggests that when schools try to create climates through increasing tolerance, decreasing bullying, and discrimination and harassment, it's really creating environments that are supportive and healthy for gay youth, but equally important, it's creating healthy environments for all youth, irrespective of sexual orientation. And I think that's a really important point of this study.
Well, it's fascinating. We appreciate you coming on today and talking about it. Hopefully it's going to help a lot of kids out there, because God knows they need it.
I hope so.
Mark, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.